You're 40 hours into a game, maybe 60, and somewhere along the way, you stopped having fun.
Ah, this map fucking blows.
Yeah, it does.
You're not sure exactly when it happened. There probably wasn't a single moment where things turned, but at some point, sitting down to play started to feel like a chore. But what's weird is you keep playing anyway. And whether it's the fact that it's a multiplayer game with a battle pass that you tell yourself you spent too much money and time in to stop, or if it's a single player game you just never clicked with that you're just playing to reach the end or get all the achievements, regardless of the scenario, the fact is you're continuing to spend time doing something you don't like. So what's up with that? Well, actually, the underlying reasoning behind this phenomenon has been studied for decades. It's one of the most well-documented and frankly most expensive rationalities in the entire human decision-making toolkit. And once you can spot it in your gaming habits, I promise you're going to start seeing it everywhere else in your life. Now, without further ado, let's get into today's agenda. The concept at the center of today's discussion is called the sunk cost fallacy. The definition is simple. A sunk cost is any resource you've already spent that you cannot get back. For example, things like time, money, effort, or emotional investment. The fallacy is the tendency to let those unrecoverable costs influence decisions about the future, when rationally speaking, they should have no bearing whatsoever. So sunk cost fallacy. The foundational research here comes from psychologists Hal Arkus and Catherine Bloomer, who published a paper in 1985 in the journal Organizational Behavior and Human Decision Processes titled The Psychology of Sunk Cost. And I think one of the experiments they did is still pertinent to this day. So participants were asked to imagine they'd spent $100 on a weekend ski trip to Michigan. Later, they found a better trip to Wisconsin for $50 and bought that one too. Then they realized both trips were on the same weekend and both tickets were non-refundable. So which one do you go on? Now, think about this rationally for a second. They already told you the Wisconsin trip is the better trip. The money is gone in both scenarios. There's no version of this where you get any of it back. So the only real question is, which weekend do you actually want more? And the answer should be Wisconsin every single time without hesitation. But that is not what happened. Over half of participants chose the Michigan trip. The worst trip. Why? Because it costs more. They weren't optimizing for enjoyment, they were optimizing for not wasting the bigger number, even though the number was already spent and completely irrecoverable either way. That's the sunk cost fallacy in its purest form. And I want you to hold that ski trip in your mind because I'm about to show you that your 60-hour save file is running the exact same play on you. The natural follow-up question is why, right? So why is the brain built this way? And a big part of the answer comes from a concept called loss aversion, which was formalized by psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky in their 1979 paper on prospect theory. This work was so significant that Kahneman eventually won a Nobel Prize in economics for it, which is pretty remarkable when you consider the man was a psychologist, not an economist. Loss aversion in the simplest possible terms is this: losses hurt more than equivalent gains feel good. So their research put the ratio at roughly 2 to 1. In other words, losing $100 causes about twice as much psychological pain as finding $100 causes pleasure. Now, apply that asymmetry to your save file. Quitting the game isn't experienced by your brain as, I am freeing up my future evenings. It's experienced as, I am losing 60 hours. Those hours get reframed right at the moment of decision from something already spent into something you are actively throwing away right now, which is not actually accurate. You spent them. They're gone. They were gone before you opened the menu. But your brain doesn't file it that way. Your brain treats quitting as the moment of loss when the resource was actually consumed a long time ago. So thanks to loss aversion, the instinct to avoid having prior playtime go to waste is roughly twice as loud as the voice quietly telling you that you'd have more fun playing literally anything else. Now, I want to go deeper here because there's a third layer that explains not just why we don't quit, but why we sometimes double down instead. In 1976, an organizational behavior researcher named Barry Staw published a study with quite an eclectic title. It's called Knee Deep in the Big Muddy. Staw was studying what happens when people are responsible for a decision that starts going badly, and what he found is now known as escalation of commitment. The finding was that when people had personally chosen a course of action and then received negative feedback about it, they didn't pull back, they invested more. And critically, they invested more than people who hadn't made the original choice themselves. Personal responsibility for the initial decision actually made the escalation worse. Why? Because pulling out is an admission. If you quit, you're not just losing the investment, you're acknowledging both publicly and internally that the decision was wrong. Continuing lets you keep the story alive that this was going to work out. And I think this is certainly a factor when it comes to the game that you keep playing yet hate. You bought it. Maybe you pre-ordered it. Maybe you defended it in a comment section. Maybe you play it with your friends. Quitting isn't just about the hours anymore, it's about admitting the judgment was off. So instead, you push yourself through and you tell yourself the increasingly sparing highs or good moments are worth all the pain. Now, there's one last mechanism I want to table, and I think it's probably the sneakiest one of the entire bunch. So in 1957, psychologist Leon Festinger introduced the theory of cognitive dissonance. In the most basic sense, cognitive dissonance is the mental discomfort that arises when you hold two conflicting beliefs or when your behavior contradicts what you believe. And crucially, humans are terrible at tolerating that discomfort, so we resolve it, usually by changing the belief instead of changing the behavior itself. 2 years later, in 1959, Elliot Aronson and Judson Mills ran an experiment demonstrating an outgrowth of this called effort justification. Participants had to go through an initiation to join a discussion group, right? Some got a mild initiation and some got a severe, embarrassing one. Then everybody listened to the exact same deliberately boring discussion. The participants who went through the severe initiation rated that discussion as significantly more interesting and worthwhile than the ones who had it easy. So in other words, the same experience was rated as better by the people who suffered more to get it, because rating it as boring would create dissonance. Like, I went through all that for this? It's intolerable. So the mind quietly adjusts the value of the thing to justify the price already paid. Now think about what that means for your save file. It's not just that you won't quit, it's that the more hours you sink in, the more your brain will retroactively inflate how much you're enjoying it, specifically to protect you from the discomfort of having wasted the time. You are at a psychological level being bribed by your own mind to stay. Now, I want to make an argument that I think genuinely matters here, which is that video games are almost perfectly engineered to trigger this entire cluster of biases, and I don't necessarily mean maliciously, though I'd argue sometimes that's true too. If you think about gacha games, for example, that would be malicious. But let's think about what a game does that real life simply doesn't. A game quantifies your sunk cost and displays it back to you constantly. Your playtime counter, your completion percentage, your character level, your collectibles found, like 47 out of 60 found, or your achievement progress sitting at 20 out of 50. In real life, sunk costs are abstract. You don't have a HUD telling you that you've spent 4 years in a career you dislike. You have to reconstruct that number yourself, and the reconstruction is fuzzy and easy to avoid. But in a game, the number is right there. Precise, to the minute, to the count, updating in live time, every single play session. You are never allowed to forget what you've spent in terms of your time and effort. Additionally, games are built on the promise of a payoff. Almost every progression system in existence is a structured promise that the good stuff is ahead. Like the class gets good at level 10, the story picks up in Act 2, the build comes online once you get the key item, this gun gets good once you unlock all the attachments. So the game is simultaneously showing you exactly how much time you've spent, and the framework of most games continuously promises that the return on that time expenditure is right around the corner. That is a nearly optimal system for producing escalation of commitment. But here's why I actually wanted to make this video. And it isn't to help you drop a mid-game that you don't like. It's because Once you can identify this pattern in a low-stakes context, such as gaming, you can start catching it in places where it's genuinely costing you something. Think about how many of the biggest decisions people agonize over are sunk cost decisions wearing a disguise. The job you've been at for 6 years that you stopped growing in 3 years ago, where leaving would mean wasting the 6 years. Or for example, my wife was in a PhD program that she ended up mastering out of because on paper it made 0 sense to stay in when we looked at the long-term outlook holistically in terms of her life and happiness. The only motivator to stay in was the sunk cost of how many years she had been absolutely killing higher ed, and it was still a months-long discussion. Or let's go to the relationship realm. Think about a relationship that isn't working, where the strongest remaining argument for staying has quietly become the length of time you've already been in it, or the business you keep funding, or the friendship that's been running purely on obligation due to the fact you grew up together. In every single one of those cases, the sunk cost is doing work that it basically has no right to do. Because here's what I think is the single most freeing realization available to anybody watching this video. The past investment is gone in both branches. If you stay, those 6 years at that job are still spent. If you leave, those 6 years are still spent. It is identical in both futures, which means it is quite literally irrelevant to the decision. The only question that actually contains any information is this: given where I am standing right now, what is the best use of the time that I have left? Now, I want to be careful here because I don't want to hand you a philosophy that's actually just a permission slip to abandon everything the second it gets difficult. That would be an extremely harmful misread of my meaning here, so I don't want to hear it from you in the comment section. There's a real difference between a sunk cost and a legitimate investment. If you're 60 hours into a game and struggling, but you can genuinely feel it building towards something, and you're still having fun most of the time, and your reason for continuing is a forward-looking belief about the payoff, that's not the fallacy we're discussing. That's a bet. And that's completely fine. Same goes for a hard year in a career or a rough patch in a relationship where the reason to stay is an honest assessment that the future is worth it. The fallacy is specifically when the past is doing the arguing. So the test I'd offer you is a simple one, and you can run it today. Ask yourself, if I were arriving at this exact situation right now with zero history attached, would I choose it? If the answer is an easy yes, then stay. You're not in the fallacy. But if the answer is no, and the only counter argument your brain can produce is the length of time you've already spent, then you, my friend, you have your answer. And I gently suggest that maybe you've had it for a while. So, in summation, the sunk cost fallacy is your brain's tendency to let unrecoverable costs steer future decisions. Loss aversion makes quitting feel like a loss happening right now at roughly double the intensity. Escalation of commitment makes you double down to avoid admitting the original call was wrong. And effort justification inflates how much you think you're enjoying something in direct proportion to how much it cost you to get there. So you put all of those together and what do you get? You get a person sitting on their couch at 11 p.m. not having fun playing hour 61 of a game they describe to a friend as kind of a slog, genuinely believing that they can't stop. So please take note, your time is the only truly non-renewable resource that you have, and the hours you've already spent cannot be redeemed by spending more of them. A bad purchase does not become a good purchase because you kept paying for it. So please, put the game down. Or don't, but make sure that if you pick it back up tomorrow, it's because you actually want to play it and not because you're trying to rescue hours that were never coming back in the first place. And once you get comfortable making that call over something as low stakes as video games, I promise you, it gets a whole lot easier to make it about the things that matter more. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. It's an absolute honor to be able to create videos for you all. If you're enjoying the discussions in the comments or the videos themselves, definitely subscribe. We'd be honored to have you join us here. There are links in my description to cool stuff, including a way to join the channel's Discord, where I'm always present and open for a chat. It's just a chill, safe space to talk about life and video games, so please feel free if that interests you. Check out the other videos on my channel for more content like this, and have a great day, night, or morning, and remember to be kind and thoughtful. Peace. Hey, bye.